Whether it's the sudden loss of a beloved mentor, a character being forced to say goodbye to a dear pal, or even a hero hopefully looking out on the horizon. Each of these emotional scenes and moments all force viewers to reach for the nearest box of tissues every single time they throw on certain Star Wars movies or TV shows. Keep it clean. So with a quick salute to the wonderful folks over at our Star Wars and the post that inspired this list that you're about to watch. I am Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 Star Wars moments that made us cry. Number 10, Luke Skywalker returns / Mando and Grogu's goodbye, The Mandalorian. Season 3 of The Mandalorian may have been a bit of a disappointment in the end, but never forget that the episode which ended the prior one boasted one of the most moving Star Wars sequences of the decade. Din Djarin, Grogu and the gang looked to be in some serious trouble as a platoon of dark troopers boarded the Imperial cruiser they were on. Before Moff Gideon could escape thanks to his menacing garrison though, a single X-Wing surprisingly arrived. As Ludwig Göransson's impactful score pumped into viewers' ears, the sight of a familiar lightsaber chopping through the mechanical threat was already enough to hit fans right in the feels. But the reveal of this very much being the legendary Luke Skywalker, somewhat jarring CGI face aside, and that he'd come to finish little Grogu's training soon led to many a tear escaping. Add in the visual of Mando revealing his face to the child for the first time as a tear leaked out of his own eye, a promise to see him again that we didn't know at this point if he could keep, and the return of another adored icon in R2 frickin' D2, and it's not hard to see why the majority of Star Wars fans were an emotional mess after this mid-pandemic season finale. Number 9, Dooku visits the tree, Tales of the Jedi. Dropping onto Disney Plus in 2022 and bringing with it a number of intriguing revelations and gorgeous storytelling, the animated Tales of the Jedi series focuses on both Ahsoka Tano and Dooku. It's during the latter one-time Jedi story that we see the eventual Sith Lord interacting with his Padawan Qui-Gon Jinn, with viewers getting to see just how much the prequel villain truly cared about his apprentice. That much was evident as a Dooku who was secretly already working with Sidious asked him about the Sith Lord he'd encountered on Tatooine. This short exchange alongside Master Yaddle, one which sees the future Darth Tyrannus talk about his student growing up so fast, and note to Jyn that he won't be able to protect him from this dark side enemy, only makes the subsequent scene even more of a heartbreaker too. Jumping forward to the time after Jin's death at the hands of Darth Maul, a devastated Dooku is found looking at the great tree within the Jedi Temple. It's here when he explains to Yaddle that a gone too soon Qui-Gon was fascinated by this tree when he was younger, due to him being raised on the steel and stone planet of Coruscant. Oh, it's a small moment, but one that makes Qui-Gon's passing feel even more gut-wrenching with the knowledge of a conflicted Dooku being helpless to save his dear student. And the entire The Sith Lord episode also forces you to really feel for a complex man who would ultimately play a big part in the rise of the Empire. And speaking of Qui-Gon's death, number 8, Qui-Gon Jinn's death, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Even before Tales of the Jedi came along and made the fall of Qui-Gon Jinn even more of a tearjerker, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace's big death was up there as one of the most emotional of the entire Skywalker saga. Taking on the Dathomirian badass known as Darth Maul within Theed Palace, Jyn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi put their all into trying to stop the return of the Sith on Naboo. In the wake of an iconic Duel of the Fates opening stretch, Jyn then finds himself cut off from his apprentice due to those pesky laser gates. Then, before Kenobi could rejoin the fight, everyone's favourite Maverick Jedi Master was viciously impaled by the ruthless Sith Lord. Ewan McGregor's soul-piercing cry set the stage for a tremendously dramatic conclusion, as Obi-Wan eventually sliced his foe in two, getting rid of the horned menace for now. But the cruel damage was already done, as Jyn gradually slipped away in his panicking student's arms and told Obi-Wan he must train young Anakin Skywalker now instead. Liam Neeson's subtle and terribly moving performance here, along with the fact viewers had fallen in love with the charismatic Jedi throughout the runtime, made it pretty much impossible not to blubber a little at this galaxy-changing demise. Now I've got a quick question for you. What do you think is the saddest Star Wars moment of all time? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 7. Jyn Erso watches her father's message. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. It's revealed early on in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, that Jyn Erso was separated from her father, Galen, due to director Orson Krennic forcing him to rejoin the Empire to help complete the Death Star. While she would then grow up believing that her father had shockingly opted to choose the Empire instead of her, all of that changed when Jyn was shown a moving hologram message recorded by her pops within Saw Gerrera's hidden base on Jeddah. Here, Galen revealed he had been undercover all this time, and secretly found a way to add a fatal flaw into the Empire's new superweapon. But it's the moment when Galen admits that he'd only been able to think about his beloved Jyn and his murdered wife when he was feeling strong, due to the overwhelming pain of losing his family, that's the real game changer here for his daughter. After going years without hearing from a father that she thought had abandoned her, watching the superb Felicity Jones finally letting her guard down as Jyn, while a stoic but broken Mads Mikkelsen as Galen offered hope to both his Stardust and the rest of the Rebel Alliance, will never not be an absolute tearmaker. That Stardust turned out to be the codename that Galen used for the Death Star plans, was just the emotional icing on this particular cake. Number 6. Obi-Wan Kenobi apologizes for all of it. Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series is far from a perfect slice of Star Wars, with things like its over-reliance on the volume and nonsensical character decisions. A pesky Lasergate strikes again, making it a quite frustrating experience for Kenobi lovers a lot of the time. However, there was still a moment there that all of the crappy lighting in the world could not stop from being an incredibly affecting experience. After the hotly anticipated rematch of the century on a rather dark planet, Kenobi breaks down somewhat in front of his old Padawan, blaming himself for his fall and apologizing to Anakin Skywalker for all of it, before then saying goodbye to Darth Vader. I mean, there's an argument to be made for it being Ewan McGregor's finest ever moment in the role, with his stunningly raw work here even leaving those on set wiping away tears as he took responsibility for the fall of his friend. The show as a whole may not have been an unquestionable home run, but McGregor and Hayden Christensen certainly knocked it out of the park throughout this tear-inducing conversation between brothers turned enemies. Thanks for checking out this Star Wars list today, my friend. And hey, if you've had a little cry today, then that's all okay too. Hit subscribe, watch some videos, everything's gonna be alright. Number 5. The Death of Fives, Star Wars The Clone Wars. There definitely was no shortage of heart-rending scenes during the animated ride that was Star Wars The Clone Wars, with the death of Satine Kryze and so much of the emotional series finale that is Victory and Death. But perhaps the saddest moments of the entire show aptly involved one of the titular soldiers who had the power to change everything. After discovering the existence of inhibitor chips that had been planted in the brains of the clones, and feeling they were all part of a mysterious plot, Fives ends up going on the run when he's accused of trying to kill Chancellor Palpatine after confronting him about said chips. Armed with the information that could have potentially put a stop to the galaxy-changing Order 66 before it was ever executed, Fives met with his pals Captain Rex and Anakin Skywalker. But before this brave clone who'd been drugged by Nala Se could prevent the purge on the horizon, he was shockingly shot down by Commander Fox. It's tough to decide what's more devastating here, the fact Fives was so very close to stopping so much suffering, or the visual of this desperate clone's nightmares finally coming to an end as he's surrounded by the brothers he was trying to protect. Number 4. Kanan Jarrus Sacrifice, Star Wars Rebels. The galaxy far, far away has seen some pretty moving sacrifices over the decades. In terms of the animated section of Star Wars though, one moment of heartbreaking heroism sits head and shoulders above the rest. During the Jedi Knight episode in the 4th season of Star Wars Rebels, Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus managed to rescue Hera Syndulla from the clutches of the Empire. However, just as the two looked to join up with the rest of their rebel pals, and right after Hera and Kanan shared a kiss after she told Jarrus she loved him, a walker blasted the fuel tower they were being picked up on. Sensing there was only one way for his friends to survive, Kanan used the Force to keep the flames and explosion from hitting them, pushing a distraught Hera away from the deadly situation when she tried to save him from his fate. But it was too late, and I didn't even mean to rhyme. All of the above, Kanan's sight returning so he could finally see Hera one more time as he fired their ship to safety, and the overwhelming score throughout make this a truly painful watch whether you know Kanan's fiery sacrifice is heading your way or not. And it's a moment that will almost always guarantee a tear or two for this fallen legend. Number 3, Obi-Wan Kenobi has a good feeling about this, Star Wars. A very different kind of sacrifice here, but no less impactful. The legendary Obi-Wan Kenobi's demise during 1977's Star Wars is one that has caused a tear to be shed for a variety of reasons over the years. During a first watch of this classic space opera, the sudden loss of the wise safety blanket of sorts was one hell of a gut punch, with youngsters all over the world's bottom lips likely quivering at the thought of Obi-Wan not being there to save the day anymore. However, with the knowledge of just how important this moment involving Darth Vader finally killing his master really was in the overall story of the Rebel Alliance taking down the Empire, rewatching this sequence has probably produced more than a few warm, happy tears too. In the space of a couple of magnificent moments, the great Sir Alec Guinness somehow conveyed to the audience with just a few facial expressions that Luke Skywalker witnessing his soon-to-be Force Spirit Master fall here would be the spark that ultimately led to the destruction of the Empire and end of the figure known as Vader. He did warn the Sith Lord that striking him down would make him more powerful than his old Padawan could possibly imagine, and knowing just how right he was here, as Obi-Wan would continue guiding Luke through the Force long after his death, is definitely enough to cause a bit of the old eye liquid to fall as he smiles at Vader. Oh, it's great, it's powerful, earth-shattering, and hopeful all at once. Number 2, Darth Vader saves his son, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. The last of the emotional sacrifices this list is going to make you relive, and that end of Vader that was mentioned earlier. Episode 6, Return of the Jedi's climax finally saw the return of Anakin Skywalker, and oh, what a return it was. As he witnessed his son being shocked repeatedly by the despicable Emperor, the Chosen One finally decided enough was enough after being spared by his own child. Picking up Darth Sidious and dumping him right down a reactor shaft, this moment also symbolized Skywalker doing the exact same thing to the evil Sith Lord he'd become all those years ago. That alone was the sort of triumphant, air-punching moment that will never fail to trigger a few tears of joy. However, Anakin's dying words to his baby boy a few moments later soon brought more teardrops, with his wish to see his son with his own eyes, and comments of Luke being right about him and saving him, all coming together to create a scene as poignant as it is iconic. It's all then brought to a bitter end with a delicate and melancholic version of the Imperial March's legendary tune, as water trickles down Mark Hamill's own face, just as it did our own. And number 1, looking out over the binary sunset, Star Wars. Star Wars has given the world a ton of rousing, uplifting, and affecting themes over the decades. However, it's hard to argue against John Williams' binary sunset as being the very best of the lot, mostly because of the sheer amount of emotion and feelings of nostalgia that wash over the average fan whenever it makes its way into their ears. I get a bit emotional just thinking about it. It all goes back to that one moment involving a certain Luke Skywalker looking out towards Tatooine's twin suns during 1977's Star Wars. Now, sure, the theme did actually first show up a little earlier than that when Princess Leia gave the Death Star plans to R2-D2, but there is no question that most remember it more for being used during that legendary sunset. After being told he would not be heading off to the academy that year, a Luke desperate to leave the desert world heads out to look at the sun setting, wishing to explore this vast galaxy so badly. Both Williams' effortlessly emotional score and Luke gazing out across the sand just leaves people with no choice but to tear up time and time again. Maybe it's the power of the legendary composer's tune, fans remembering where they were when they first experienced this magical trip to the galaxy far, far away, or the all too familiar feeling of just longing for a little more adventure in their lives. Or it could just be a combination of all of the above. Whatever the reason, there is simply no getting through this epic setting of the suns without a few droplets hitting your cheek.